Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the Oraculos True Divination podcast, where I bring you ancient wisdom for the modern mystic. I'm your host, Mychal A. Bryan, and joining me today is my dear friend, Mr. Mitchell Lewis. Mitch, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Michael. I can't wait to get this going. This will be fun.
Me too, Mitch. Now, for our listeners out there, if this is your first time joining the True Divination podcast, this is a podcast where I bring you interviews from astrologers from around the world who are not only changing their lives with astrology, but who are also contributing to the greater astrological landscape that we all share. So if you want to be a part of the magic and the momentum that we're building here on the Oraculos True Divination podcast, please take a moment, I'll give you one, and go down below, hit the like button, and also subscribe so that you continue to receive notifications of when I bring you these interviews. Mitch, I want you to tell us a bit before we go into the meat and potatoes of where we're going today. Tell our listeners a bit about who you are, how it is you came to astrology, and also how it is you came to be interested specifically in the fields of mundane astrology and financial astrology.
Well, I'm a New Yorker by nature, but when I was in my late teens, early what they call the salad days, I moved to Cambridge, Massachusetts. My brother was living up there. I had some friends up there from my old high school friends, and so I moved into Cambridge. And one day I met a woman lived across the hall from me. And her name was Jane. It's funny how we remember these things decades later. And she told me she was a witch. I said, well, okay, you conjure up spirits. I mean, what do you do? Well, I do astrology. I said, astrology? Well, I've heard of that. So she gave me an astrology reading. And somewhere in my boxes in my house, I actually still have the notes from that. I haven't looked at them in decades. But she told me more about myself in an hour reading than the shrinks had told me from the time I was 6 years old and, whatever it was. And I was absolutely hooked. So I called my brother. I said to him, David, I just got an astrology reading. He said, you're kidding. So did I. The same week, from a different astrologer, of course. So we started talking about it. And I went to the guy who had given him a reading, and he gave me a reading from his own angle, but it was very much of a piece. It sounded very similar. And we were hooked. And right away we started to study. And I'm a musician by trade. And so I was, studying and writing my songs and playing in piano bars and whatever, putting bands together. But I continued to study astrology. And then I moved down to New York. And I found that if I went into the clubs to play, I was an accompanist for some of the cabarets in those days, and I ran my own band. And I couldn't tell people that I was an astrologer because they'd all bring their charts in. And nobody would listen to my music. They would all say, look at my chart. Oh, you're an astrologer. So I had to kind of keep it in the background for a while. But I always studied, continued to work, and did lots of readings. And one day, one of my clients, who I was actually teaching piano to, and doing readings for him. He was a commodities trader. He said to me, does this astrology stuff work in the financial markets? And I needed a job. I said, of course. He said, okay, you know what? He said, cotton is trading at $1.17 a pound. It's never gone that high in the history of cotton. And we don't know what to do. Everybody on the floor is losing their mind. It's going limit up every single day. Do you think you can find the top of cotton? Well, I realized I had one shot. Either I was going to be right or it was going to be the shortest career in the history of the world. So I said, yeah, you bet. So he got me what's known as an analyst badge so I could come and go from the floor. And I went on there, and they had computers that gave me 20, 30 years of every commodity. And I had my ephemeris world, which is the book for your listeners who don't know, that tell you where all the planets were. And so I did a massive research in a matter of a week. I had to come up with the answer. I had to find the top of cotton. And using instincts, as most astrologers use, as well as the numbers, I went through cotton and I looked at the history of how cotton traded, and I said to myself, cotton is ruled by the planet Venus. Now, in the old books, it actually says cotton is ruled by Neptune, but it's in parentheses, which means that the authors were not sure. So I said it's ruled by Venus. And we had a full moon in Libra, which Venus rules, coming up. And I went to my friend and to his partners, there were 4 of them, and I said, the top of cotton is next Tuesday. It's a full moon in Libra. Well, cotton had been going, like I said, limit up. And in commodities only allowed to trade, the futures can only trade a certain amount, and then it shuts down. Cotton, the futures limit was 3 cents, and 3 cents in cotton is $1,500 a contract. So people couldn't get out of their positions. The thing would open up, limit lock, open up 3 cents higher, 3 cents higher. For weeks, this was going on. And I said to them, this is the top. You have to sell cotton on Tuesday morning. Well, they were frightened to death. What if I'm wrong? They don't want to lose money. And my partner actually went to London that day. He had business over there. And he said to his friends, he said, I want you to sell 1 lot of cotton. They were scared to death. And stand by the pit. And if he's wrong, get the hell out. So cotton opens up. And like I said, for weeks, it had been opening up, limit up, limit up, limit up. Right on the full moon in Libra, it opens up unchanged. It goes up 5 ticks. It comes back down, goes down 5 ticks, comes back up. And it lays there. It does nothing.
Wow.
Right before lunch, right before they break for lunch, the phones start ringing off the hook. Sell, get out, sell, take the profits, get out. It went limit down for the next 8 days.
Wow.
We made I don't remember exactly how much, but thousands of dollars on my 1 lot of cotton. And they were hooked. They said, oh my God, look at silver, look at gold. What about Deutschmarks? What about yen? What about coffee? What about orange juice? And I started to trade. I started to do this, and I had my own accounts, and and I made a living right from the beginning. Now, again, some of it was instincts, but Mychal, I did a ton of work. I am by nature a little bit of an obsessive compulsive, and when I get into something, I get into it. And I had notes. There was a period of time when Mark, my trading partner, we would get together for a session, a learning session. He would have a book that had all of the prices of the commodity for the last 20 years, and I had the ephemeris. And I would tell him when the top and the bottom of each of the markets was. And it was unbelievable. I mean, unbelievable. Some of the trades we made were amazing. People don't tell you about the trades where they lost money. They only tell you about when they made money. But I was able to make a living. In fact, after a market crash, when the people who were backing our commodities business pulled out their money because they needed it for their stock margins, I was forced to trade a very small account where I could only move one lot of anything back and forth, and I still was able to make $3,000 or $4,000 a month off of that. Essentially a $20,000 account, and I was making 25% a month. So it works. It works. And I have all the books and all my research here, and I had rulerships for everything. Just to give you a little quick example, the soybeans are known as the poor man's bond. Now, I haven't done commodities in a number of years. I haven't been on the floor for quite some time. But when I was trading, the way that it traded was if bonds went up, soybeans went down. If soybeans went up, bonds went down. Well, I found that Mercury had a great deal to do with both of those commodities, which is why they traded in reverse. And so on and so forth. Coffee is a drug. It's ruled by Neptune. Neptune rules drugs. So I did all of this work, and then I started to get interested in the stock markets. It's bigger money. Commodities is really the wild west of trading. As I jokingly was said recently in a lecture, I said, here's the difference. In the stock market, you have to wear a tie. In commodities, they don't care if you wear pants. Markets go up, markets go down. It's wild time. Anything that we can make money, who cares? And that's how I worked there for about 12 years or so. And then one day in 2001, you may not have heard of it, I don't know, but we had something called 9/11. And I was staying with a friend of mine. I'd come back from Miami. I was down in Miami for a while trying to figure out if I could walk on the beach and trade and make a living. And I came back to New York just in time for 9/11, which I had been predicting for about a year on a regular TV show that my friend Jenny Lynch did in New York on Manhattan cable TV. And I was crashing at her house, and she started screaming in the morning, Mitchell, get up. I said, what happened? She said, you were right. They blew up the World Trade Center. Now, needless to say, that day was a day I will never forget. I lost my friends, my trading accounts, my clients. We lost everything. It was, in one way, the end of the world as I knew it. So during that period of time, I started to do lectures for a group called SIRE, S-I-R-E, the Society for the Investigation of Recurring Events. Now, it sounds very mystical. What it really was people in the markets, because they believed in patterns. They knew there were patterns. They used Fibonacci numbers. They used the Gann wheel. They used all kinds of 200-day moving averages. There's a lot of things you use when you're trading stocks and commodities and bonds and things. But it all comes down to recurring patterns, which is what astrologers work with. Well, the last time Saturn opposed Uranus, this happened, so let's assume that's going to happen again. Which, of course, the more astrology you do, the more you realize you can't. It doesn't always work that way. Sometimes it will follow the pattern, sometimes it won't. And so what I learned to do, among other things, was not to separate astrology from life. When you teach classes, when you teach astrology, students always come to me. Oh, well, the last time Jupiter was in Capricorn, this happened. Isn't that going to happen again? Not necessarily. It's like watching a river. You know the old saying that 5 minutes later, it's a different river. The water has moved on. And every time you look at it, it's a different river because it's moving. Life moves. And every time that we get into a new system, it's like dating. You date the same person over and over and over again. Well, no, every time it's somebody different. Maybe they're not going to respond the same way. And you're different. So you're going to respond to them differently. So what happened was I started to do a series of lectures for this group at the Princeton Club in New York. And I did my research on oil. Everybody wanted to know about oil. So that was the big game in town. So I used, again, my instincts. And I said, well, oil. I said, well, oil is buried in the ground. We think it's dead dinosaurs. They're not sure, but they think it's organic material. And it has transformed mankind more than any other commodity, with the possible exception of maybe wheat or something. And I said, it's ruled by Pluto. There's no question in my mind, it's ruled by Pluto. So I went back and did all this homework and looked at the history of oil and the oil, especially the oil trading, but not just oil trading, because they only started trading oil in the early 70s. But Pluto was discovered in 1930. And in 1930, the University of Texas handed out its first degree in a brand new study called petrol engineering. The very year that Pluto was discovered, they gave it a degree. So I started to predict, as Pluto was getting ready to enter Sagittarius, and I'm doing a webinar on all of this so people will be able to see the PowerPoint when I finally post it up. I said, at the time, I believe oil was trading around $17 a barrel. And I said, oil's going to go above $100 a barrel. Oh, they laughed. They said, oh, sure. And I did the lecture at the Princeton Club, and everybody was very nice. I had a nice crowd, but not a big deal. The next year, oil was trading in the 30s. The place was packed. The year after that, oil's trading in the 50s. You couldn't get a seat. They gave me the biggest room in the organization, which I think was the James Madison room. Place was slammed, and then oil just exploded as it moved through Sagittarius, and it went to $140 a barrel right before it left Sagittarius, That's called a melt up. And literally within a week or 10 days of when it entered restrictive Capricorn, oil plummeted from $140 a barrel to $40 a barrel. Then it retrograded, went back into Sagittarius, it ran back up above $100 a barrel, went back into Capricorn, it collapsed again. I had made my reputation. Then all of a sudden, people, they were throwing money at me. They wanted me to trade, clients, and, all of this. Well, if you're right about a couple of things and you really know what you're doing and you talk well, you get a little famous. But after 9/11, I lost my taste for the whole thing. I mean, Wall Street, it wasn't the same. I had lived in Battery Park City, which is right across the street from the Commodities Exchange, and I had moved out by that time. But a bunch of us were down there. There were some psychics I knew and some other astrologers, and we all used to point up to the World Trade Center and say, that's coming down. We'd all shake our heads, yes, and then we'd go out for a beer. And when it finally happened, it really did change the world in ways that we could never have imagined. For one thing, everybody expected Wall Street to die. It's going to be the end of it. And just the opposite happened. On the theory that lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. Now, if you go down to Wall Street, they're building every place they can find 12 feet. Brand new apartment buildings with gyms and with all kinds of things. And the entire area has been redesigned. Mychal, I write murder mysteries with an astrologer detective. And I'm working on the 4th book right now. It's called Satan in the Second House. All my books, Murder in the 11th House, Death in the 12th House, Evil in the 1st House, and so on. If I live long enough, I'll get through the whole zodiac. And it takes place down on Wall Street. And the detective who made his money trading commodities, well, you write about what you know. So he goes back down to Wall Street, and I get a chance to. A lot of my readers like the fact that I take you through New York City. The detective takes his little walks into different neighborhoods, and I describe them all. People who have been to New York, or even if they haven't, they enjoy that. And I realize that Wall Street reinvents itself every so often. And now we're at a point where the whole thing is being reinvented. People say to me, I don't understand. We have a pandemic that killed 100,000+ people in America. We have a crashed economy. We have, all kinds of issues, political and otherwise, and everything that's going on. Why is the stock market making new highs? Well, it's a simple answer, and it's not a simple answer. The simple answer is they've created a bubble. There is no other place that you can make money right now because the Trump administration has lowered interest rates so that you can't make money putting your money in CDs or in savings. You can't make any money buying bonds. So the only place that you can make money is in the stock market. Also, the feds have put hundreds of billions of dollars into the market every time it goes down. They're puffing it up and puffing it up. Now, they're doing it with our money, tax money and Social Security money and so on and so forth. And it's all interconnected. Now, so, the markets tumbled as I had predicted they would, not to blow my own horn, but, it's what we're here to talk about.
Blow it.
I have no problem with that. I got a lot of Sagittarius in my chart. I'm happy to tell you what I did. In a series of lectures I did up and down the East Coast last year, I predicted there would be two crashes. That what would happen in 2020 is the markets would show intense volatility with days of 1,000 points up and down. Little did I know. We've seen days of 3,000 points. This is, an unbelievable thing. And that we've seen that. Now it's on another melt up. It's come right back up again. And I believe that the second crash happens at the beginning of 2021. That's what my astrology is telling me. Now, again, I'm going to have webinars out there, and they'll be available for people. And I can't do, obviously, in-person lectures yet.
Right.
I enjoy that because I like being on stage, and I enjoy the interaction with people.
Right.
But I'm going to do Zoom meetings, assuming that I can figure out how to use Zoom properly.
Mitch, I have a question to ask you, and I think it's going to dial it in a bit for the astrological community that's going to be watching this video. How do you think we as astrologers can benefit from the practice of financial astrology? Because from what I hear you saying, the traders and the people who work in those markets, they benefit greatly from having a financial astrologer on their side. But how can we as the astrological community benefit from a study of financial astrology for our own lives?
Well, for one thing, Michael, they also benefit from having very large bank accounts. No, I'm serious. You know the old saying, money comes to money? When the stock market crashes, the rich don't sell, they buy. The middle class gets stuck in the middle. One way that people benefit from it, I've gotten dozens of emails and texts and phone calls and whatnot, thanking me, saying to me, thank God I saw you lecture in Connecticut or in Boston or in New York or wherever, Baltimore, Chicago, wherever I was. I've been saying the same thing for over a year. Because my husband and I got our money out of the retirement fund. So we didn't take that big hit. Now, 2 months later, the stocks are right back up where they were. One thing I'm able to do is get people to sell their stocks. The hardest part that I had, because I also predicted the '08 crash more than a year in advance within a week of its occurrence. Saturn was in opposition to Uranus right on the New York Stock Exchange's Mars. I knew there was a crash coming. I, again, lectured. I was on radio. I go on coast to coast AM regularly a couple of times a year, and I've been talking about this for the longest time. And in 2010, after the last aspect of that, the last pass of that opposition, I told everybody this is where you buy back in. And a lot of people were frightened, and they couldn't do it. And of course, the markets rallied for the next 3 years. So how do you use, well, one of my astrological friends is a guy named Bill Sarubi. He's known as Bill Meridian in the business. And Bill wrote a number of books in which his philosophy was that you're not trading IBM. You're trading IBM stock. So the chart of when IBM first came into existence is meaningless. The stock that you watch is the IPO of IBM when the stock first started to trade. And long before I met Bill, when I was on the floor of the exchange, I was using his book and his philosophy. And I found it to be very true. Now, commodities is different. Cotton has been traded since ancient Egypt. How are you going to find when cotton first began? But you can look at when oil first started to trade on the exchange, and that's a chart you use. But it works best, I found, with stocks. And interestingly enough, I worked for a number of years for a very sweet guy in Colorado, a very good friend of mine, who is a ticket broker for sporting events. And he heard me on Coast to Coast, and he hired me to do the work. And I would tell him what teams would make the playoffs, so he would buy the right tickets. And I used the first game that the team played. Not when the team was incorporated, the first game that they played, and was very successful with him for quite a number of years.
Wow.
He's semi-retired now, so we don't do it that much anymore. And I picked Super Bowl winners months in advance, long before it was just the two of them. I picked I forget the name of the team. It is terrible, but World Series winners, and it's brilliant, and it's worked on based on the same philosophy that it has to do with when the team or the stock or when people get married, we do a marriage chart. That's essentially when a whole new entity in your relationship began. Now you can look at when you first met, or when you first made love, or when you first went out to Italian food, but when the marriage takes place, there is now a contract. And so you have a point to start with. So getting back to your question, how can people use financial astrology to
How
make a
how
living.
how can right? So how can the astrological community use financial astrology not just to make a living, but also to navigate our own lives as humans as well as astrologers?
Well, I mean, essentially, we live in a material world. Mychal, I mean, I'd love to live in an ashram and eat a bowl of rice every day. And some of my students tell me that's what I did in another lifetime. I was a monk. I don't know. But we don't. We live in a material world. And while money should not be in the list of priorities, to me, it's health, time, friends, then money. All the money in the world isn't going to make you happy if you don't have friends and you don't have health. Here's $100 million, but you're going to be sick the rest of your life. You know what? Keep your money. But we do need money to improve our lives and to do things we want to do and to take advantage of things and whatever it is. But not everybody's motivated by the same thing. So most of the people who come to me strictly for financial astrology, they want to know, how do I get my retirement fund up? What stocks should I buy? What's right for me now? I try not to moralize when I do astrology. I don't tell them they shouldn't buy oil companies or they shouldn't buy polluting things. I don't. I'm very careful about what I invest in because I believe in karma. And I also want to, from the minute I get up till I go to sleep, I do the best I can to add to the society. Do I get angry at Starbucks sometimes? You bet. How could you run out of coffee? You make one product. How can you tell me you're out of coffee? Well, I know you're lazy. You were back there doing whatever you were doing. You weren't making coffee. But we try our best. So people come and they want to know what to do with their lives. How best, in my novels, my astrologer is immensely wealthy. He owns a townhouse up on 93rd Street. He's invited me there once or twice, but I can't afford to buy it. And it's what he does with his money. There's an old saying, what we can't fix in life, we fix in art. And he is always has an eye for people who need help and are worthy of his help. So when we're dealing with financial astrology, it's not just a matter of I want everybody to be rich and send me a piece of what you make. That's not what motivates me. It wasn't even what motivated me when I was on Wall Street. I was not motivated by the money. First of all, I found it to be a challenge. And I got a chance, Mychal, to see astrology in action in the way that very few astrologers do. I was on the floor watching astrology work every single day of the week. The floor has boards all around with cotton and Deutschmarks and silver and this and that, all, and you watch the numbers tick. And I go over to the computer and I had my ephemeris and whatever in my laptop, and I'm recognizing that what we're seeing as Uranus squares the sun and the stock market drops, 15% over a period of a week and a half, we're seeing astrology work on a collective way that, again, many astrologers never get the opportunity. I know some very brilliant astrologers. They're terrific. Some of them are very good financial astrologers, but they never got a chance to be on the floor of the exchange. Circumstances. They didn't live in New York, whatever it was. And so I got this great opportunity to watch it in action and in motion, and it made me a much, much better astrologer. Forget about the financial part. When I deal with my clients about their relationships or their health issues, because I also do a lot of medical astrology, it's one of my specialties, but life choices, I want to move, and blah, 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 I now take into account everything about them. Yeah, well, first of all, they want to know about financial money. Okay, financial astrology, you don't have to tell me how much you're worth. It's not my business. But if you want my advice on what to do with your money, I need to know, do you own your own house? Do you have a mortgage? Are you happy in your marriage? Are you thinking of leaving your spouse? Are you moving somewhere else? Are you leaving your job? All of that adds up to a piece so that I can then help direct them in what to do. Many people right now are trying to decide whether they should leave their home, whether they should sell their house. They're a little afraid of what's going to happen over the next couple of years. We are in recession. How bad is it going to be? Or is it just going to suddenly disappear and everything's back up and everybody's making a fortune? Well, be nice to feel that way, but I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Mhm.
I think we have a couple of years of aggravation ahead of us, and we're going to have to deal with it on a logical, realistic level. Now, just to say astrology says blah, blah, blah. Now, again, there are many, many people today who call themselves astrologers. All over Facebook, all over everywhere, the internet, everybody, they read 3 books, they do a few readings, they open up a website, they're all astrologers. Okay, I'm not going to get into who's good and not good. That's up to whether your clients like what you say or not, and whether and you're doing your homework. But I know people who have studied for decades who really know this stuff. And then I run into people who really don't know this stuff. But they're calling themselves astrologers. And they see an aspect, or maybe they'll watch one of my videos, or they'll see somebody else, another financial astrologer, and they'll get it in their head. Now I know. And they go and they give people advice. Gold's going to $20,000 an ounce. Really? What makes you say that? Well, you don't know nothing. You've never studied the markets. You have no idea. For gold to go to $20,000 an ounce, the world will have to end. In which case, what good is your gold going to do for you? And, but again, just as an example, and with the stock markets too, a lot of people are making all kinds of predictions all over the place, and they don't know what they're talking about.
So, Mitch, for your clients who they have no interest in the stock market, they have no interest in actually trading on that level, and they're
Right.
just your average person who is like, hey, here's my chart, this is my second house, how can you counsel me in terms of my monetary affairs? Like, how do you approach that person?
Well, I mean, again, I don't separate things. For example, somebody called me up recently. She's got a lot of equity in her house, and she has a mortgage, and she'd like to pay off the mortgage because she hates the thought of being in debt. I said to her, what's the percentage of your mortgage? Well, we refinanced recently. It's 3.5%. I said, you'd be out of your mind to pay off your mortgage. You're getting money for 3.5%. You can buy AT&T stock and get 7%. You can make 4% by doing nothing but moving that money where it belongs. Now, a lot of people are not going to trade, nor should they. It makes you nuts. I have that kind of personality. I've got 2 computer screens going on at the same time, and I'm trading over here, and I'm doing my clients. But I try to help people make decisions. Again, if you want to be a trader and you want to know what stocks to trade, well, that's a different deal. I'll cut a deal with you, and I'll tell you what I think you should buy. And if you make money, you got to pay me. And if you don't make money, well, you'll probably fire me. But when it comes to putting your life in order, it has to do with how old are you? How much do you have in your retirement fund? If the stock market crashes, how long can you survive waiting for the markets to come back up again? If you're 35 years old and you got money in the stock market, leave it alone. If the markets don't come up again, we're going to be eating each other, so it's not going to matter. There's going to be no economy left. But if you're 65, 70, and you're going to need that money in the next 5, 7 years, you can't afford to take a hit on your retirement fund. So you take those issues into account. Also, how's your health? Do you have health insurance? Are you married? How's the marriage going? Well, I tried to kill my husband last time. Yeah, I took him out to the woods. He found his way home, but, if you're dealing with people that have personal issues that are going to become a problem for them, you have to look at their finances differently. And again, health issues, that becomes very important. Even if you have health insurance in America, until we make a change, which we better make soon, God help you. There are people who got the coronavirus and they had health insurance and they're getting bills for tens of thousands of dollars. I know one friend, thought he had coronavirus and talked to his doctor over Zoom. And the doctor said, well, if you really get short of breath, Call an ambulance, come down to the hospital. Guy said to him, call an ambulance. It'll cost me $2,000. I'll get in a cab for $11.50 and I'll go down. If I'm going to drop dead, what's the difference whether I do it in a cab or again? So we have to take those issues into account when we decide what it is that how we're going to move. Sometimes they'll say to you, I want to move. I'm thinking of moving to, I recently did an interview, with a client, wants to move out of where he is. He's in the South and he's thinking of maybe going near water with him. Can you do relocation charts for me? I said, of course. We do astrocartography and what we call the local sidereal time for relocations. I said to him, but I'm not going to spend 100 hours looking at every city there is. You have to tell me 4 or 5 cities you're considering, and then I will tell you what you can expect in each of those places. So we did that. And I told him where I thought he belonged. So, then, like I said, it's all of a piece. I think I want to move to New Orleans. Okay, what are you going to do for a living in New Orleans? Well, I thought I'd be, blah, blah, blah. Well, they don't have that in New Orleans. How about you consider going to Miami? Or, well, I'm an actor. What do you think I should do? Get a real job. But don't get me wrong. I've been in the arts my whole life. Mychal, I jokingly say to people, if I had a child who showed any creative talent, I'd lock them in their room until they're 40. Then they can decide whatever they want to do with their lives. But I wouldn't give up my background in the arts for anything, even though there were years that were awful. I don't want to get into it.
I know exactly what you mean. I spent a big part of my childhood and my early life in dance school and dancing all up and down the place throughout Jamaica and in Cuba as well. So I completely understand that struggle.
Yeah, it's a tough world. It's a tough business.
Mitch, what I think you're presenting to us is a very practical and concrete and grounded approach to astrology that's really based in the realities of people's lives. And I don't know if I've ever really sat with another astrologer who has taken all of these other considerations of a person's life into the equation, but they're also very vital: our health insurance, our mortgage, and all of these other things that really define the physical, tangible, Saturnian parameters of our lives, and things that we definitely have to also be aware of. And I think that what you're doing is you are essentially giving a very New York, if I could say so, you're giving a very New York approach to astrology, which is really rooted within our human experience. And I'm really loving everything that I'm hearing. So thank you very much for sharing that.
The best astrologers I know tend to do that. They seem to be a little more realistic. I had a client come to me. She had been to another astrologer who told her that she was going to become a rock star because certain planets were going into her 10th house. And she said to me, what do you think? I said to her, I have to hear your band. Well, what do you mean? Doesn't astrology doesn't tell me whether you have talent. Uranus is going into your 10th house. You're going to change careers. There's no question about it. Are you going to be a rock star? Let me hear what the music sounds like. Now, I'm not saying that I am the judge of everything. There are some artists I think stink and they have hit records, and there are some I think are absolute geniuses. They can't eat dinner. They can't afford food. So I went and I heard a band, and they were, oh my God. I mean, if they're going to be hits, I don't know. But it's not my job to quell somebody's dream. But I said to her, well, you're going to change jobs. There's no question about it. Am I going to make it music? Well, maybe, you keep trying. Again, it's not my job, but I knew she wasn't, unless the whole universe was changing and, God was really a comedian. And she did. She changed jobs. She had been a dancer and she became a bartender. It wasn't going to happen because astrology doesn't make things happen. It's just like when I do medical astrology and when I teach it, which is something that I pulled back from teaching because I was afraid that people would misuse the knowledge, quite frankly. Now I'm getting so many demands for it, and I do want to give my knowledge out because, for one thing, I'll be dead someday, and what good is it going to do me then? But also it's what we do astrology for. We do it to teach and to share it. If I say to another astrologer or to a client, well, you know, Uranus is in opposition to the sun in the natal chart, which implies problems with the circulatory system. And because of their age, Uranus is now squaring that place. There's a chance that there could be a problem. Does that mean the person's going to have a stroke or a heart attack or an aneurysm? No. A lot has to do with what they eat. Do they exercise? Again, it's a logical astrology. Now, do I think astrology, I tell you, Mychal, to me, astrology is magic. How can I look at a piece of paper to somebody that I'm never going to meet, that I'm on the phone with, and tell them all these things about themselves, about their relationship with their mother, about their health issues, about this, about that? That's insane. It's absolute magic. And yet I find people who say to me, well, I thought you could tell me everything from a chart. I'm telling you amazing things, and you're not satisfied with it. Maybe the problem isn't in astrology. Maybe the problem is yours.
Yeah.
So my point is that in order to be a really, really good astrologer, what I call a nuts and bolts astrologer, and it doesn't matter if you're doing mundane astrology or you're doing personal astrology. I do both. World events, great. When I was on Coast to Coast recently in January, I predicted that Joe Biden was going to win the presidency, and he was going to win it by a large majority. Well, the people who run the show tend to prefer Mr. Trump. And so they were a little shocked. And the producer came on a commercial. He said to me, "You were actually predicting Joe Biden?" I said, "Absolutely." And he said, "Okay, Mitch, well, we're going to want you on again before the election." I said, "Fine. This is what I do." Of course, the show is on from 1 till 5 in the morning. So you got to wake up at 2 or 3 in the morning, have a cup of coffee, and do the show. But it's a huge audience, and it's very good for your business and whatnot. But even when I look at Joe Biden's chart, when I'm predicting, I did a lecture, this series of lectures that I did in Connecticut and Boston and everything else. I used Trump's chart, Joe Biden's chart, America's chart, and at that point, Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders was still in it. I used their charts. I even looked at FDR's chart. I looked at Robert Kennedy's chart and his assassination, because something is going on in Trump's chart right now that's identical to what happened when Bobby Kennedy was killed. That doesn't mean that Trump gets killed, but it is an indicator that Trump will not be in office. And then I look, like I said, at America's chart, I look at the stock market chart, and I do all of this work. People want to study mundane astrology with me, and I say to them, you need a lot of patience, and you need a lot of time. For me to do a 20-minute webinar, I may bring up, well, you watched one of my videos where I use PowerPoint, and I bring up 30, 40 charts. And not just charts of astrology, charts of the Dow, charts of the S&Ps, charts of many things, America's chart. And I bring all of this into play. And then I try and put all the pieces together like a jigsaw puzzle. And then I look, oh my God, it's a bunny rabbit. Look at that. And that's what you have to do, in my opinion, if you want to be a really good astrologer. Now, many people who do astrology have other jobs. You got to make a living. My brother is an excellent astrologer. He always was. But he had a child, and he had to raise her and his family, everything else. And he couldn't sit here and rely on whether the phone's going to ring for the next 2 weeks and he's going to get clients. So he had jobs. He works for MIT, does their faculty newsletter, had a lot of really good paying jobs. He's got a nice house up in Cambridge and whatnot. Some people, some of the astrologers I know are excellent astrologers. They have jobs, full-time jobs or secondary jobs, and they supplement the astrology with that. And that's fine, and I understand that it does limit the amount of time that one can spend. There are times, because I do this full-time, and I also do other things. I trade stocks, and and I occasionally do music work, and I have a lot of different ways of making a living. But I look at astrology charts 7 days a week, often from about 8 in the morning, which is when I get to my computer, until about 4 in the afternoon. I'm just doing one chart after another. Either I'm preparing for a webinar, or I have my clients on the phone, or I'm doing some work that I do. I write out yearly reports for some of my clients, and you add it all up, and I'm doing thousands of hours of astrology every year. And not everybody's got the time to do that. But the really good astrologers, and there are many of them out there, some of them are just terrific, and they've been doing it for many, many years. Again, this is not the business where after 6 months, you put your hand on a rock, look up in the sky and say, I am an astrologer. Right? You got to earn your keep. You've got to prove yourself. And then you go and you lecture and you talk to other astrologers and you study with different people, just like being a shrink. Really good shrinks study with other shrinks, and they get shrunk. They have to go through therapy in order to be a shrink. If you want to be licensed in a lot of states, you have to prove that you've been through therapy yourself. Because what do we need a fruitcake telling us what's wrong with us when they don't know themselves? So, you add it all up, you put it all together, and that's what makes a great astrologer. And like I said before, being on the floor of the exchange gave me this perspective that to this day, I didn't realize at the time. It wasn't till hindsight when I'm talking to other astrologers and I say to them, well, you know what? I think this. They'd say to me, how did you connect all that? Because I traded commodities. And they said, what do you mean? Well, cotton, which is where I cut my teeth in cotton. That was the first trades, and I was right next to the cotton pit for many years that I was down there. Cotton is grown in the South of America. It's grown in Egypt. It's grown in India. There are certain places in the world where cotton is grown. They're growing it now in China. And how come if the news comes out and there's no cotton anywhere, there's droughts down south and there's flooding in India and there's no cotton anywhere, so you expect the price of cotton to go up because cotton is scarce. Why does it go limit down? Well, and at first I didn't get it. I didn't understand. But I started to look at the astrology of it. I said, oh, wait a minute. Venus rules cotton. Venus is going into Libra. Venus tends to go into Libra in the spring. And quite a number of my friends on the floor of the exchange were Jewish. They're drawn to the business. And so they used to have what they called the Purim trade, because the Jewish holiday of Purim takes place in the spring. And they, I think it's Purim. Well, whatever. Forgive me if I'm making a few mistakes here because I'm stream of consciousness. Anyway, they would come to me and say, when is the Purim trade? When is the trade when cotton's going to go up because Venus is going into Libra? And I would look at my ephemeris and I would tell them. And I would say 4 out of 5 years, cotton exploded when Venus went into Libra. Not every time. There's the rub. How come it doesn't happen every time? Well, how come every time Saturn opposes Venus or squares it in your chart, you don't feel the same? You'll feel some pressure from the Saturn, but one year you'll also have Jupiter trine to your sun at the same time. Uranus is crossing over your midheaven, and whereas Venus has a lot to do with money, you figure Saturn conflicting with Venus would limit your finances, but what do you know? You got a raise, and you got a new job, Saturn. And so you put all the pieces together when you're reading your client's charts. It's the same thing when you're doing mundane astrology. Why is Joe Biden going to win? The reason Joe Biden's going to win under all of it is because Donald Trump's full moon eclipse, he was born on a full moon eclipse, sits exactly on America's Mars-Neptune square. America has a Mars-Neptune square, which makes us a fearful country, and we are. There's a lot of fear in America. Also, Mars rules war and Neptune rules drugs, and we've had a war on drugs for the last 80 years, which has been a failure. So Donald Trump's full moon eclipse sets off the fear in America. That's exactly how he got elected. Well, if you don't elect me, it's all going to go to you-know-what. So a lot of people voted for him. Joe Biden's Jupiter sits right on top of America's Mercury. Uncle Joe, tell us a bedtime story. We don't want this craziness anymore. Please help, make it better. And there are so many Americans now, Republicans, staunch Republicans who have never voted for a Democrat in their lives, are going to vote for Joe Biden. So again, it's not the only thing that I look at. I look at dozens of charts, America's chart, the stock market's chart, everything. And who Joe Biden picks for his vice president when he finally does pick it, we're going to look at that chart. And you add it all up. And then, like I said before, you got your jigsaw puzzle. But I've been working on this. I've been working on this now for over a year, and doing lectures one after another. And it gives me an opportunity. First of all, I'm forced to do the work. Well, I'm going to lecture. I promised them I'm going to lecture. Oh my God, what am I going to talk about? So I sit here and I come up with things, and I put it together. Now, when I was on Coast to Coast, George Noory said to me, well, now you've said Joe Biden's going to win. You could be wrong. And now it's in radio. Now it's on, in the archives. I said to him, you know what, George? Maybe I'll be wrong. And he said, you're right. Maybe you will be. I said, I'm not going to stop astrology because I make a few mistakes. But I don't think I am going to be wrong. I think that we are going to see a blue wave in this country because it's enough. Are you kidding me? Look at what America looks like right now. My God, the pandemic, the economy, 60 million Americans unemployed. Now, George Floyd's death, and on and on and on. And these have all been issues that have been building up for generations. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when we had massive protests in the past, and that it took a long time to make changes. Doesn't happen in a long weekend. So we're at a point where we're at a crossroads. If we continue down the same road, we're falling off a cliff. And I think there are many Americans who finally got it. They said, oh boy, maybe I don't like Joe Biden. Maybe I think this or that about him. Have you ever met a politician you liked everything he ever said? Come on. There's an old joke. How do you know a politician's lying? His lips are moving. Everybody's full of it. Everybody lies. They got their own agenda. They're taking a little pocket of cash, whatever it is. But there are different attitudes and different perspectives. And while I have quite a number of friends who will not vote for Joe Biden, either they wanted Bernie Sanders, and so they're not going to vote at all, or they like Trump and they're going to vote for him, or whatever it is, I don't give up friends because of politics. I think the politicians steal enough from us. I don't want them stealing my friendships. But I do spend time trying to convince them, and they spend time trying to convince me. One of my dear friends sent me a link to Fox News so I can get it on my phone. And I wrote him, I said, seriously?
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what the politics is. It matters what America needs right now. In 2016, we needed Donald Trump. We needed him to show us, among other things, through negative input, what can and can't work. All right, got 3.5 years of that. That enough? Now we'll try something else. And there's a reason, Mychal, why we swing from Democrat to Republican to Democrat to Republican. We are by nature a centralist country. We have a Sun-Saturn square. We don't like to go too far to the left, too far to the right. After the 60s, after 1968, when the Democrats burned down Chicago and Bobby Kennedy was killed and Martin Luther King was killed, and it was just one horror after another, America elected Richard Milhous Nixon twice. Now, I heard that he had a little trouble in his second inauguration. I'm not sure about it, but that's what happens. We pull to the right too much, we pull back to the left. We pull to the left too much. After the 60s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, a lot of Americans were freaked out. Said, oh my God, those hippies, they're going to burn down the world. And this Woodstock, I can't, this guy, we got to get rid of him. So they elected Nixon. And that's what we do. So, we had Trump, and he did certain things and whatever, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it, because that's never mind. I don't, unless I'm doing an actual political, interview, right. I don't care. It is what it is. America's got a lot of problems. We have to get our, what together, or we're going to have, this is not going to go away. And the problems that the systemic problems of racism and of inequality in finances and of a decaying nation. You can't go over a bridge without, praying, can I get over this bridge? We need a new tunnel built between New York and New Jersey. Something like 35% of all the money that is transited through America goes through the Northeast and through those tunnels.
Wow.
And we have two antiquated tunnels, the Lincoln Tunnel and the Holland Tunnel, and they are both falling apart. And we were supposed to build a third one, and the governor of New Jersey refused to back it, so we never built it. We need a $5-10 trillion FDR type of rebuild of America, and then there will be jobs for everybody, and the bonds will go up, and the cities will have money, and that's what makes America great. Mm-hmm. Not just taking the money and sticking it in the stock market, so a handful of people make all the money, and the rest of us,
right. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I mean, it's really rich stuff that you're going into there. And I know that our listeners, they want to know a bit about the astrology that underpins that, as well as what do you have to say regarding the astrology that we're moving into within the next few months?
Well, we're in the middle of an eclipse season. Eclipses come in pairs. I always say they're afraid to travel alone. So the two of them go together. There's always because the eclipse has to do with the nodes being involved in it, which is why Donald Trump was born under an eclipse, because the North Node conjuncts his sun and opposes his Sagittarius moon. He also has Uranus conjunct the sun, make him a little crazy. The first eclipse, the one we just had, was in Sagittarius at 15 degrees. And then this coming Saturday on the 20th, we have a solar eclipse, a new moon eclipse at 0 degrees Cancer. That's called the Aries point or the world point, the 0 degrees of Cardinal. For those who don't know this, each of the 4 seasons begins the day that the sun enters each of the 4 cardinal signs. The day the sun enters Aries is the first day of spring. First day of summer is the day that the sun enters Cancer, and Libra and Capricorn, and so on. So when anything hits 0 degrees of Cardinal, it's called the world point. It's a very powerful placement. And it in no way does it imply good, bad, or otherwise. On Facebook, I just did a post last week because of this eclipse, because of the full moon lunar eclipse. Everybody's frightened because Mars was squaring it, and oh my God, what's going to happen? And I wrote that my title was Full Moon Eclipse, Let the Healing Begin. And my point was that in astrology, sometimes things will build to a peak. It's like having a pimple on your face. It's so painful until you finally can pop that pimple, and then the healing begins. We have been under tremendous stress for a long time. Everybody's been locked in, especially in New York and some of the other places, for 3 months. We're all out of our minds. What I wouldn't give for a haircut, I'm telling you, I would pay $100 just to have somebody give me a trim. But
your hair looks great. So
thank you. And the George Floyd murder brought everything to a peak, and everybody was frightened that it was going to blow out of proportion. And just my feeling. My gut feeling. Again, I'm not always right. I'm not God. He calls me occasionally for a reading, but I'm not in. Can't get him to make the PayPal payments, by the way. It's impossible. You've got to chase him down. I felt that could very well be a peak, that could be the release. And so far, that seems to be the case. The protests have been mostly peaceful. There's been a tremendous, tremendous outpour of love that I have seen between protesters and police, between so many things happening. Not everybody, of course. Certain people in Washington just do not understand. And there are some people in our society, whether they're cops or citizens, whatever it is, who do not get it. But to a large extent, The feeling that I have is that for the moment, it has settled down. Now people want to heal. But again, I posted this on Facebook in case anybody wants to go and read what I've said. The Vietnam War, the first protests about the Vietnam War started in the mid-'60s in Berkeley, California. It took more than 10 years to end the war. We had one protest after another, or 500,000 or 1 million people showed up in D.C. I was living down in D.C. at the time. And one march and one protest after another, and there were riots, there were all kinds of things. It took 10 years. It doesn't happen in a few weeks. Now, we have been trying to deal with racism for 400 years in this country. It's not going to just suddenly snap your fingers. But I believe that we have made a move. I believe that this is a real movement. This is not going to be forgotten. Yes, granted, a lot of people protested because they didn't have jobs. A lot of people were unemployed so they could go out and march. Now, when they go back to work, are they going to forget about it? I don't think so, not this time. Because the astrology of the big buildup in Capricorn that I'm sure you know, and all astrologers know, we have our Pluto return. America has its Pluto return. And we had Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and Mars all conjunct in Capricorn, all dancing across our Pluto and opposing our Mercury and really setting off this immense amount of energy, which is why everything has happened. Why would America be the epicenter of the coronavirus? That doesn't make any sense. Sure it does. Pluto rules the elimination of waste in the body. It rules the colon, the urethra, the sweat glands, the tear ducts, any way that we remove waste from our body. Pluto also rules hidden agendas and things that are buried deep within us. Well, racism is a virus in our nation, in the whole world, and it needs to be brought to the surface finally, once and for all. And that is what I think this is all about. We are in the healing process. It's not going to happen suddenly, not going to happen over a couple of eclipses. We're looking at a long, extensive change. But there are many reasons why I believe we change administrations in November, and this is, at the very least, one of the most important ones. Is Joe Biden going to do everything we want? No. What, are you crazy? That's ridiculous. Nobody ever does everything we want. But we are at a point of massive collective change. I don't want to use terms like the age of Aquarius. It's so misunderstood, Michael, so misunderstood. When I lectured in New Orleans for UAC in 2012, I decided I was going to do something a little different. So I got up there and I said, what if this was 2,000 years ago? And we were about to enter the age of Pisces. And you're all astrologers. And we're in Rome. And you're going to give a lecture to your audience. What would you tell them to expect over the next 2,000 years? Well, age of Pisces. Pisces has to do with religion. Christianity grew right then and there at the beginning of the age of Pisces, but it took 400 years before it became anything resembling a state religion, and it took until the Emperor Constantine, who made it the Holy Roman Empire, and so on. It doesn't happen. Boom. So we are at a point where the changes are starting. We see it technologically. We see it in our attitude towards medicine. My mother is quite old, and the only thing that she loves is reading and driving. Now she's almost 95, so she's not driving anymore. It's enough. So my mother had a detached retina, and I went with her to the eye doctor, and the eye doctor said to me, we have a new procedure where I'm going to inject a little bit of gel behind her eye, and as the gel dissolves, disintegrates, it reattaches the retina. We don't have to cut her eye open. We don't have to do anything. And son of a gun, it worked. Her eyesight it's not 20/20 at 95 years old, but it's fine. She reads. She was driving again afterwards. It was an absolute miracle.
Wow.
It was Aquarian. It was Uranian. It's a change. We're going to do, my brother and I were talking recently. He says to me, it's only a matter of time before we do Beam Me Up, Scotty. where they'll take your molecules and they'll disintegrate them and they'll send you to Europe and boom, and then you don't have to sit on a plane, you know. And who knows? And maybe it will, maybe it won't. But we are definitely at a brand new, very exciting period. I can't wait to be reincarnated as a short Chinese woman next time, which is probably what we'll all be. And see what they have in store for us.
Yeah.
I mean, in 1918, the world thought it was so modern. Had this great war, and we had telephones now. You could talk to somebody without leaving your house. Oh my God. And telegraphs, you could tap, tap, tap. Look at this amazing stuff, and automobiles and flying machines, and oh my God. And now 100 years later, holy mackerel. I can only imagine what my father or his father thought about if they were born before all those inventions and then afterwards. Holy mackerel. It's a whole new world. Which leads me to believe, as I've said many times, you do not change ages in a matter of a couple of years. It takes generations. And I believe that the Aquarian age really started, or its very beginnings, back before we entered the 20th century. And that it took 100 years of all of this new stuff, and now we have computers. In my hand, you hold a phone that has more memory in it than the computers that they used in the Second World War that were the size of a room. It's remarkable how fast we are moving now and how quickly it's changing. And I can talk to you over a video thing, and you're in the Bahamas. Can we switch places? I'd like to be in the Bahamas for a week. Why don't you come up here? I'll go down there. Push that button. Boom. Now we switch.
I'm taking a New York sabbatical, and I've been on my New York sabbatical for the last 2 years.
No, I don't blame you. Tell you the truth, I'd like to take a sabbatical. If it wasn't for the virus and being locked in New York, I would have spent part of this past winter and spring in Florida or maybe on some of the islands, because I live for the beach. I love the beach. I'm a Cancer baby, and I'm born in July, and please. It's the only reason to be alive is to listen to the seagulls and splash in the waves.
They fly past my house every day, actually.
I'll bet they do.
For the rest of this year, Mitch, what do you see us moving towards astrologically?
Well, for one thing, we are seeing the economy open up a little bit. They lied. They said they created 4.5 million new jobs last month. Stock market went up 1,000 points. That's all BS. They didn't create nothing. A lot of people who are out of work got to go back to work. And still, we have between 16 and 20% unemployment. So this is not going to suddenly go away. But when you're at zero, when you used to be at 100, and now you're at 0, and you get up to 10, oh wow, look at how we've really grown things. And you allow your optimism to return, because that's human nature. So they are going to rally the stocks back and forth. There'll be ups and downs. And the election, you know how I feel about the election. I think that the Democrats take over the White House. And I think that it's going to be a very difficult transitional period, because Donald Trump has destroyed half of the Washington entities, and they have to be rebuilt. I also am quite concerned about the economy, because we are living a debt-fueled resurgence. We have trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. Now, some economists say, who cares? Just print more money. What's the difference? Problem is that that's what happened in 08. What they were doing was they were selling mortgages to people who made $30,000 a year. They were selling them a $750,000 house. Wow. They couldn't pay it. Then what the banks were doing was they were bundling the mortgages, and they were calling them equities and selling them, which is why when the crash hit, Ireland, Iceland, Portugal, Spain, they used to call it PIGS, P-I-G-S, Portugal, Italy, Greece, Spain, PIGS, and Ireland and Iceland, they went completely bankrupt. And the result was a very deep recession that many people never got out of. They had to work 3 jobs just to pay their bills and put food on the table. And there's still, and now you have 60 million unemployed Americans. And even if some jobs come back, let's say you worked in a restaurant and now you go back to the restaurant and they can only do a third of the people and you got to have space and people. I'm in no hurry to run back to a restaurant. I love bars and restaurants. It's New York City. What else do you have to do here? Go to a museum once a year and you run to bars every night. But am I going to sit in a restaurant with a chef in the kitchen and maybe sneezing on my salmon? I mean, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. So we're going to see a slow recovery. And then, of course, if there is a second wave of the pandemic, which the astrology says there will be, if it's bad, in 1918, there were several waves. The first wave happened in March 1918. And Saturn was conjunct Neptune. Saturn is restrictive. Neptune rules infectious diseases. It restricted the virus. It was a very bad virus. People were dying of it, but they didn't know how bad it was. Then the war ended, and everybody came back, and the aspect had changed, and now Saturn was in opposition to Uranus. And between 50 and 100 million people died in 6 months.
Wow.
Think about that. Now, we started this pandemic with Neptune in sextile to Jupiter. Jupiter's expansion, but it was a sextile. So the virus was very bad, but we learned we could control it. That's what a sextile or a trine gives you. We were able to control it. And, you know, you wore masks, you stayed inside, you did whatever it was. They took your temperature, which is meaningless. And they managed to contain it. New York got hit the worst, but most places weren't that badly hit. Now, in February of 2021, Saturn squares Uranus. And I expect there's going to be a second wave. And there's going to be a stock market crash. I hope I'm wrong. Mychal, I don't care about being right or wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I do care about that because who's going to hire me if I'm wrong all the time? But that's not the point, to be right all the time. The point is to do the astrology, explain to people whether they understand astrology or not. Don't forget, when I lecture for a lot of people who don't know very much about astrology at all. So I can't lose them in the astrologies. So I have to explain to them, well, Saturn rules restrictions. Uranus means this. Jupiter means that. Now, when you add it all together, this is what it means. Donald Trump better look for a new place to live.
Right. Mitch, in the 21st century, we're seeing so many different approaches to astrology. And as I hear you talk, I hear you using the outer planets really as critical pieces to your analysis of the terrain and the field of mundane astrology. But how do you feel about this revival, in a sense, of traditional astrology, insofar as there are many people who feel that using Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are not necessarily the best thing for us to be doing in our astrology? Do you feel as if there is a mundane astrology of the 21st century that does not incorporate Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto?
There's a reason why those planets were discovered. One in each century. In the 1760s, they discovered Uranus just in time for Ben Franklin to put a key on the end of a kite and try and kill himself. It rules electricity. After doing that, he invented the lightning rod. So you put it on top of your house and your house doesn't burn down. It also is the planet that rules not only revolution, but it rules government of and by the people. The 10th house, Saturn, rules dictators, kings, queens. The 11th house, Aquarius, Uranus, rules elected officials. The outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and if there are trans-Neptunian planets besides that, they are the collective. The inner planets, it's your personality. Before Saturn, when Saturn was the last known entity in the solar system, that was the end. That's where they got the name Satan from. Saturn came along, and the astrologers went, "Oh my God, it's back again. The king's going to die. The cows aren't going to give milk. The crop, my wife's going to have twins." But you know, the Babylonians used a lot of the fixed stars, Regulus and the rest of them. So there are many different levels of astrology, and there are many different ways, many roads lead to Rome. Okay, there are many ways that you can look at charts and look at this all and come to a similar conclusion. Personally, I feel that if you ignore the outer planets, you are ignoring several things, not the least of which is, how do I fit into the collective? We are no longer living in little tiny towns and villages. We're not living up on a mountainside with goats. We're living in cities of 20, 30 million people all over the planet. And when Neptune was discovered in the 1800s and led to a lot of beliefs in seances and ghosts and all the Neptunian stuff, and then when Pluto was discovered in 1930, Pluto rules Nazis. What do you know? Duh. Discovered in 1930, 1933, they gave Hitler the chancellorship of Germany. The rest, as they say, is history. You ignore those outer planets, and you are ignoring how the collective functions. Can you make predictions? Mychal, I know people who they look at you, they look at the way your hair looks, your eyebrows, whether you wear a mustache or not, they'll tell you everything about your life. I don't know how they do it.
Wow.
I use astrology. And with the astrology, not only do I understand you as an individual, but I understand how you fit into the collective. You know, Chiron, right? Chiron was discovered in the 1970s. People call it an asteroid. It is not an asteroid. It's a burnt-out comet. And while the asteroid belt sits between Mars and Jupiter, Chiron sits between Saturn and Uranus. To me, it represents the bridge between the personal, up to Saturn, and the collective, Uranus. And when I do medical astrology, I use Chiron a great deal in it, and I find that where the Chiron is placed in the chart and how it's working by transits and so on and so forth tells me a great deal about the illness. Is this illness, for example, I recently had a client when the Chiron was placed in the first house and was very afflicted, and I said, do you live near, and the problem was in the immune system. I said, do you live near any kind of poisonous substances? Yes. She lived near a lake that was so polluted that you were told not to go near the lake. And it had infected the groundwater. And I believe that that's the problem. That's where the problem originated from. Because the Chiron connected what the collective had done to her individually. Other people in that town may not have been affected physically the same way she was. So my point is, the roundabout way of saying, you can't ignore the outer planets. Look, I don't usually use the asteroids in my readings. If somebody wants them, I put them in. I've studied, so much Chazarai. It's, you do it for your whole life, for many lifetimes.
Right.
But I don't find they're necessary. You want them in, I'll put them in. I'll talk to you about what Eros means and all the rest of it. I have a particular way of drawing my charts. I like to keep them simple. The main planets, Chiron, the nodes, of course. Sometimes I'll put in the vortex, whatever I think is necessary for the time. But I like to keep them simple and easy. Because if you have too much in there, I'm sorry, you just get a headache. But if you leave those outer planets, now again, I'm not telling another astrologer how to do their work. They have their own way of doing it, of course. But I think it is so vital. And they read, some people say to me, I understand Pluto's not a planet anymore. I say to them, you go through a Pluto transit and tell me that that's not a planet. Okay? Pluto will wipe you out. It will clean your clock until you make the changes you need to make. But it's this tiny little thing all the way out. That's not how astrology works. Got nothing to do with gravity. It's not pulling you. I sit on a couch next to you and Saturn's pulling me differently than it's pulling you. That's stupid.
Right.
But it is the map of how we fit into the universe. And the more, every time that humanity discovers a new heavenly body, our collective consciousness rises. Remember, they discovered Uranus just in time for the American and French revolutions. There was no government of the people. Yeah, ancient Athens. There were, 45 people living there and 40,000 slaves. And, come on. This was an attempt, at least, to create a Uranus-based style of governing, and so on. And Pluto did what it was supposed to do. It brought the Nazi in us all to the surface. And so we had the Second World War, and 30, 40 million people were killed in that war, and what a horrible, oh my God. And then immediately after the war, we started on this huge, tremendous growth. And because Pluto rules what we hold collectively, it's the 8th house, what we hold collectively, there was something called the Marshall Plan, in which General Marshall created this program to rebuild Europe. We done what they did in the First World War. After the First World War, Germany was, you needed a wheelbarrow full of money to buy a loaf of bread. Wow. Germany was destroyed through the 20s and the 30s. Hitler didn't come to power just like so. For an entire generation, the Germans were living in dire poverty and inflation out the wazoo, and they had to pay reparation to the other countries, and nobody tried to rebuild Germany. And after the Second World War, these people were a little smarter. They said, we're not going to do that this time. And they rebuilt. We lent money to France and to Germany, well, Western Germany, and to Britain, and to, Italy, and, people that had been our enemies. And look, Japan, our biggest enemy in the world. And then everything in Japan became American. Oh, they loved the Americans, and the troops were there, and,
Yeah.
That's the outer planets doing their business. So don't ignoring those outer planets, in my personal opinion, limits your view. Now, again, I'm not going to put everything into my charts. I look at Regulus. You know why I like Regulus? Because Donald Trump was born with Regulus right on his ascendant.
Yeah.
It's the kingmaker, and if you do not use your power correctly, you have a tremendous fall from grace. And that's what we're watching. And because solar arc-directed Uranus is sitting right on top of his ascendant right now, pop, all done. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
So again, and I watched a little bit of the video that you sent me of that woman astrologer, I don't remember her name offhand, about traditional astrology. And again, I know there are lots of astrologers out there who have websites and they talk about it, and it's all the ancient astrology. Well, Mychal, we haven't learned anything in the last 150 years. Isabel Hickey and Evangeline Adams and all of these great astrologers and Noel Till and all of them. There was nonsense. Their work was useless. You absorb what they've read. You may disagree with some of it. That's okay. You can't close your eyes. I have a saying. Say there's a difference between stupid and ignorant. Ignorant is when your eyes are closed. Stupid is when you close them again once they've been opened.
Wow.
I have all the patience in the world for ignorance. I have no patience for stupidity. And so we've been given all of this knowledge. Why would you ignore it? You can choose what to use and what not to use. Plenty of astrologers love the asteroids. They put them in their readings, fine. And they've done more studies on it than I have. I don't particularly need them. I have my own way of looking at it. But how can you ignore that every single time that one of these outer planets is discovered, our civilization changes radically? Radically. Even when Chiron was discovered, and like I said, it's just another heavenly body up there, supposedly a burnt-out comet, got caught in our sun's orbit. We rediscovered holistic medicine. Western medicine took a big drop. Personally, I'm not very fond of Western medicine. They're going to give me a pill, an anti-this, an anti-that, an antidepressant, an antibiotic. How come there's no pro? Only pro is probiotics. Everything else is anti. I don't take the medicine unless I absolutely need it. And I try to heal myself through herbs and food and meditation and, whatever. That's my feeling.
Right.
Is that, use whatever works for you. That's fine. I don't care. And I'm always happy. I talk to a lot of my astrology friends about their ideas and their philosophy about the way astrology works. But most of my friends, not all of them, most of them, not only do they use the outer planets, they're the mainstay. Well, Saturn is the swing planet. But you got Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto. I have Saturn and Pluto conjuncted exactly opposite my Cancer sun. Someday in another phone call, I'll tell you what I went through the last year or so. It was not the easiest year in the world, but I used it properly. I went out and lectured to death. I wrote, I'm on Facebook. And as a result, it increased my power, increased my renown and my knowledge. And I struggled with it. And it was a rough aspect. And I'm certainly not completely done with it yet, but most of it is past. And I learned from it. You ignore the outer planets, you're missing out on tremendous opportunity to not only get how you fit in the collective, but what your past lives are all about. We look at the nodes for past lives, and I always tell my clients, if you don't believe in reincarnation, that's fine. It's not going to interfere with your reading in the slightest. Everybody who ever came to me after having a past life told me they were a king, they were a queen, they owned 4 apartment buildings. Come on. We were all, sweeping the streets or whatever we were doing.
I was a red-headed Irish woman who they threw off the edge of a cliff for practicing witchcraft.
Well, you probably deserved it. It's hilarious. It's very funny.
Yeah.
Look, we can't prove any of it. We believe what we believe. And, look, my goal, and most of the astrologers I know, our goal is to help.
Yeah.
You don't get rich as an astrologer. If you work hard, you can make a good living. And I use it for the stocks and, increase my income and so on. But we're there to help.
Yeah.
And to teach and to grow. And one of the things that I hate, we're all arrogant. All astrologers are arrogant. Oh my God, I know this magic. I'm king. I'm a genius. Okay, everybody's a genius. And to some extent, you got to be, if you're going to be in this business, it's a very competitive field. And everybody's trying to, all the new kids are coming out and they knew this and they do that and everybody studies. So you got to prove yourself over and over again. But arrogance isn't the answer. Not for astrology. Not for a therapist. I know some therapists who are terribly arrogant. I don't know how they keep their clients. You're there to heal the soul. Not to show off. And if you can do a little bit of both, that's okay. When I lecture, I love to lecture. Mychal, I love it. I got the moon on the ascendant in Sagittarius. Look at me. Hey, aren't I smart? But I'm in Cancer underneath it. So after I'm done lecturing and I'm Mr. Big Shot and we go out for dinner afterwards, I sit very quiet. I say, what's the matter? Well, for one thing, I just lectured for 2.5 hours. I'm exhausted. But also, I'm a Cancer. I don't want to fight in the restaurant. When I'm on stage, I tell you what I think, and I'm Mr. Big Shot.
Mitch, spending today with you was absolutely positively incredible, and I truly learned a lot. I had particular preconceptions regarding what financial astrology was like when you and I first spoke, but hearing you speak about it has made it seem as if it's just as vitally a part of our astrology as any other branch of astrology, because there are things that I practice within my own natal work with my clients that don't actually belong in natal astrology. They fit within another branch. It might be a horary thing, or it might be a mundane thing or something. But I find that when we have this full understanding of the full breadth of the landscape of astrology, then we naturally begin to pull things in from other branches, and it allows us to become not only better astrologers for the sake of being better, but it allows us to become more helpful astrologers. And I think that that's the most important thing that you touched on today, the fact that we aren't just here to be great, but we're here to be helpful.
Just one more point before we hang up. Like I said, I do a lot of medical astrology. I'm very well known for that. I've done a lot of lectures and teaching of it. I also take classes in anatomy, nutrition. I talk to doctors and acupuncturists all the time. I learn the new procedures. I know what medicine somebody's taking. They tell me. If I don't know, I look it up on the computer. I read about it. And then I have at least some idea of what we're talking about. That's what I meant before by you can't separate astrology from life.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really an approach that I think we all could benefit from in terms of our astrological practice. Like when I wanted to be a better counselor within the work that I do, I went to hypnotherapy school. And so I think that it's really important that we know the thing that we do very, very well, but we also have the perspective to integrate other related parts of what we practice
Absolutely.
into our field,
Absolutely.
so we become more holistic astrologers and more holistic helpers of humanity.
I couldn't agree with you more, Michael. That's why I say to people, take the blinders off.
Yeah.
We're all busy. I got to take care of my laundry. I got to feed the dog. I got a date. I got this. I got that. I got to cut my toenails. There's a whole world out there. And when we do astrology, what happens to a lot of astrologers is they get into a funk, into a pattern.
Yeah.
Every reading is kind of the same after a while. Well, I'm going to list Saturn and this and that and blah, 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 blah. But every client is different. And their needs are different. And I'm guilty of it. After doing this for so many years, oh, yeah, another reading. What do you want to know? And sometimes I find myself getting that way. And then I'll stop doing readings for a month or two. And then I'll work on my novels or do whatever. And then I will pick up again. And I have a fresh approach to what I'm doing. I'm relearning the things that I learned already.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think this was great. I'm very happy to have met you and to know you.
Mitch, this was absolutely wonderful. And honestly, some of the things that you said today were unbelievable in their breadth and in their scope. And I just want to thank you for stopping by and spending time to share virtual space with me and also to share your knowledge, because I think that what the astrological community needs now is to hear from our elders, to hear from people who've been in the field far longer than we have, especially this new generation of millennial astrologers who are coming in and making a name for themselves. And so it was absolutely an honor to sit down and talk with you today. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you. That was very kind of you. Very sweet.
And for our listeners out there, Mitch, please do tell them where they can find you, if they want to get a reading from you, if they want to learn about your books. Where can we find you online?
My website is mitchastro.com, mitchastro.com. Also jupiterrising.com. That's because I'm a Sag rising after all. And you can always email me at mitchastro@AOL or follow me on Facebook. In fact, go to the website, put your email address in there, and you'll get all my posts and all my newsletters for free sent to your email.
Good.
The easiest way to keep in touch.
Good. So I will put all of that information down below in the description box for all of our viewers who want to reach out and get in contact with Mitch, because I'm sure that I'm not the only one who's excited to really dive more deeply into your work, Mitch, and I trust that our viewers also feel the same.
That's great, Michael. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very, very much.
Most definitely, you're welcome. And now for all of our viewers and listeners out there who've stuck with the podcast from the beginning, from the bottom of my heart, I'm so grateful for you being a part of watching the Oraculos True Divination podcast grow. If you haven't done so already, please not only like this video, but also subscribe to the Oraculos True Divination podcast so that you can become a part of the magic and the momentum that we're bringing to you right here on YouTube. I mean, there are so many other places that you could have been, but you chose to be here with us. So please do go down below, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so that you can continue to be a part of this magic and this momentum that we're building here, right here on the Oraculos True Divination podcast. Until next time, be well I love you. Thank you once again, and talk soon. Bye-bye. Mitch Lewis,
Thank you, Michael.
thank
I
you.
don't like to be called one of the elders, you know. I'm only 28, for God's sake.
Well, I just turned 28.
Did you? Oh, good luck with your Saturn return.
Yep, it's coming up.